This book began a couple years back, actually, when I was doing the 7 to 11 at night at WIP. And I was off and on against the Phillies game. And to be honest, I had to find something in the summer that would bring people over to me from the Phillies game. Luckily for me, this is before the Phillies got to be good, so it was a little bit easier back then. These days, everybody listens to the Phillies. But I noticed that guys like to talk about certain things, and WIP is a guy station. Our audience is men, generally 18 to 59, 18 to 64 years old. That's the audience we're looking for. No offense, ladies, we love having you too, but our advertisements are sold to men. So I'm trying to figure out, all right, so what do guys like to talk about? Guys like to talk about sports, guys like to talk about women, guys like to talk about what they do, and guys love to talk about movies. And anytime I would do something with movies, I would find I would get calls, I would get listeners, the show would just fly by. So I started a once-a-week show in the summer that I was calling the Movie Club for Men. And what I did is I would feature a movie or a kind of movie every week, and I would find everybody wanted to talk about it. And just like guys will argue, you know, who's a better quarterback, Donovan McNabb or Randall Cunningham, they would love to argue about movies and debate movies and bring up their favorite movie and, oh, I watched this movie with my dad and so on. So out of that grew the idea, because we had the debate, what are the best sports movies ever? So Ray and I started thinking about it, and we started coming up with the best sports movies ever. And 5 movies became 10 movies, became 25 movies, became an idea for a book. And that's when we decided to do this book, which we very modestly called The Ultimate Book of Sports Movies, featuring the 100 greatest sports films of all time, plus a lot more. There are in this book, there are lists of the 10 worst sports movies of all time. We have a chapter on great sports movies to take a date. You can't miss. They're perfect. Great sports movies to watch with your kid. We have chapters in the book on the actors who were the best and worst athletes. Kevin Costner tops that list. Kevin Costner, last night, I don't know if anybody was wasting their time like I was last night, but I tuned into AMC last night, which is just a great channel. And last night they ran Field of Dreams. And you watch Kevin Costner in Field of Dreams, and he really can play. He really can throw. So we did a chapter on the best actors as athletes, and the worst, and the best athletes as actors, and so on. And we came up with a lot of fun chapters. But the book centers on the 100 greatest sports movies ever made. So, assuming that you haven't all yet bought this book, and I invite you to do so, but assuming that you haven't yet, I'm just curious. You tell me your favorite sports movie, and I'll kind of tell you where we put it and why we put it there. Sir, you got the front row seat, which I always admire. The person, I teach a class at St. Joe's, and you always know the person who sits in this seat is going to be your best student for the semester.
No, it's out in the sun.
Oh, it's out in the sun. All right. Well, I shouldn't be so complimented. There you go. What's your favorite sports movie?
I guess Slapshot.
Slapshot. I like this guy already. I love this guy. We love Slapshot. If people here haven't seen Slapshot, it's a movie made in 1979 starring Paul Newman. No, 77, excuse me. Starring Paul Newman, which basically, the idea for this movie came from the old Broad Street Bullies, if anybody here remembers that team of fighters and muckers and brawlers. It's a great comedy. It's got very good hockey action. And Paul Newman, made that movie in his mid-40s, and the man could skate. He wasn't just a sex symbol for women. Paul Newman was a bit of an athlete. We ranked Slapshot the 6th greatest sports movie of all time. We love that movie, and really, if you look at our rankings, depending on what you would consider as other, it's the best sports comedy ever made. So, love Slapshot. Anybody else got a favorite? Yeah.
Hoosiers.
Hoosiers. Everybody loves Hoosiers. Well, here's what it came down to with Hoosiers. We were really fortunate that the foreword to this book was written for us by Gene Hackman. The great Gene Hackman, the great actor, was nice enough to write the foreword for the book. Before Gene Hackman got the role as Coach Dale in Hoosiers, by the way, best coaching role ever in a movie. I defy anybody to ever find a greater coach in a movie. That's the best one. Before he got it, you know who they cast in the role? But he couldn't do it because he had another movie at the time, was Jack Nicholson. And imagine how different Hoosiers would have been if Jack... Nicholson's great. Nicholson is a great, great actor. I don't think the movie would have been as good with Jack Nicholson. We love Hoosiers, and we rank Hoosiers as the second best sports movie ever made. All right? Anybody else? There was a young man. Yes?
61?
61? When did you see that? Well, I guess you saw it on TV.
No, actually, I have it.
Oh, you have it. Okay. 61. Good for you. I respect that you respect the history. How many here have seen the movie 61? Oh, I guess a lot of you. Okay. 61 was an HBO film that came out a couple years ago. It was produced and directed by Billy Crystal, the great comedian. And it focuses on the year 1961 and the race between Mickey Mantle and Roger Maris to break Babe Ruth's home run record, and all the pressure that was on, well, mostly Maris. Mantle handled it better. And what's amazing about that film to me is how well Billy Crystal cast actors who look just like Maris and Mantle. There's an actor named Barry Pepper who plays Roger Maris, who could walk down the street in a crew cut and you'd think he was Roger Maris. The other thing that Billy Crystal did for that movie is he really respected history. There's an old baseball player named Hoyt Wilhelm. And Hoyt Wilhelm gave up one of the very important home runs along the way. Hoyt Wilhelm was a knuckleball pitcher. And so to cast somebody to play Hoyt Wilhelm in the movie, even though it wasn't a speaking line, it was just kind of a guy pitching to Mantle and Maris, Billy Crystal went out and found a guy named Tom Candiotti. If there's real hardcore baseball fans here, you remember Tom Candiotti was a successful knuckleball pitcher in the major leagues. So Billy Crystal very carefully cast actors or athletes who really looked like those people, threw like those people, and could play like those people. And by an amazing sheer coincidence, we put 61 at number 61. So that one's easy to remember. Now I do believe we are in the metropolitan Philadelphia area. Last I checked, Collingswood was part of it, which is surprising because our #1 movie has not yet been mentioned. So, yes, young lady, what? Rocky! There you go. Yes. We made Rocky. We listed Rocky as the best sports movie ever made. In the ultimate book of sports movies, the 100 greatest movies starts with Rocky. Now, let me say this.
Which one?
I'm glad you asked that, sir. Because that's what it boils down to. And this is the shame with Rocky. Stallone made so many sequels and so diluted the franchise that what started out as a great movie in 1976 and won the Oscar that year for the best movie, and by the way, it was up against some really good movies that year. It was awarded the Oscar for the best movie, but all these years later, people remember Rocky II, which was the rematch, Rocky III, where he fought Mr. T, Rocky IV, where he fights the Russian, Ivan Drago, Rocky V, which, by the way, is the worst sports movie ever made. Rocky V, it actually never happened. It's just a nightmare. It never happened. And Rocky VI, which came out a couple years ago, which was kind of a sweet kind of follow-up all these years later. But the original Rocky is so good because it's a very sweet love story between two kind of people that nobody ever noticed. That you know, she works in a pet store and he's just a local bum in the neighborhood. But they have this romance, and it's the ultimate story of the underdog guy who gets his shot and doesn't win the fight. I don't believe I'm giving away the ending to nobody who's ever seen the movie. I don't want to be a spoiler, but if you haven't seen it since 1976, well, that's on you. That's not on me. But in the end, he stands on his feet, and by doing that, he's a somebody. They have made hundreds and hundreds of underdog sports movies. You've seen them all. Most of them are in this book. Hoosiers is an underdog story. Miracle is an underdog story. Rudy is an underdog story. There are dozens of great underdog story sports movies, but Rocky, while it wasn't the first, really set the model for everyone that followed and did it the best.